please welcome panel moderator, Liz Shoo from Deutsche Welle.
Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Minister, for that speech. You touched on a lot of issues that we are going to discuss right here on a panel that will start shortly. And as you can see, the crew is already bringing some chairs because we want to prepare the stage for our opening panel discussion. My name is Liz Shoo. I'm a journalist and a TV presenter. I am based here in Germany, but I grew up in Tanzania. And I want to take you back to the year, Tanzania, hello. I see that there are some people from my home country. Wonderful, welcome to the HSC. So I want to take you back to the year 2000 because that is when I was in 6th grade in Tanzania. And I remember how excited I was when my teacher told me about the United Nations and about how there's this plan, the global community getting together to deal with global issues, to deal with problems that are facing so many people that I was seeing in my home country. So to fight extreme poverty, to make sure that we have clean water and sanitation, to fight global hunger. And I was told that these goals are called the Millennium Development Goals. Okay, a teacher told us that, the international community has 15 years to reach those goals. And to me, it sounded logical, like, okay, in 15 years, we will have dealt with these problems. Fast forward to the year 2015, I heard that there's another global plan to deal with the same problems. This time, the plan is called Sustainable Development Goals, and we have until 2030 to reach those goals. Ladies and gentlemen, in the year 2030, my daughter will be in class 6. And it is my hope that when she's in class in the year 2030, that her teacher will not be telling her about how there's another 15-year plan to deal with old problems that we had planned and vowed to deal with back then. So let us take this HSC as an opportunity to really be serious about reaching the SDGs. And we've heard it in the speeches before that this is a place where we want to talk about scalable solutions to global problems. This is a conference where we want to talk about how to accelerate investment into the SDGs. And this is a place that brings together the people, the businesses, the organizations that will implement the changes that we want to see in our world. So as we get together to discuss and debate, as we sign declarations, as we network and celebrate milestones, let us remember that the people out there are hoping that this will be a conference that will make a difference in their lives. They believe that when their leaders get together in Hamburg for a 2-day high-level conference, that there will be an outcome, an impact that will be positive and that will bring a positive change in their lives. All right, so I see that the crew is done, and I now want to welcome my esteemed panelists for the discussion. We're gonna talk about building trust in turbulent times, strengthening global alliances. So please join me in welcoming the panelists. First of all, we have all the way from South Africa, the Minister for Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, Her Excellency Maropene Ramokgopa. Welcome to the stage. Please, you can sit there. Right here. Sorry? Yeah, here. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, it is now time to test your geography skills because we have the Minister of Sustainable Development, Environment and Climate Action from the island state of St. Kitts and Nevis. Please welcome Her Excellency Joyelle Clarke. Welcome. Please sit here. And of course, at this conference, we also want to get the perspective of various UN agencies. We are very happy that some of them are represented here. Please welcome the Executive Director of the World Food Programme, Cindy McCain. Also with us today and joining the panel is the Secretary General of the UN Conference on Trade and Development, Rebeca Grynspan. Welcome. Please sit here. And completing our panel is the Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, Her Excellency Reem Alabali-Radovan. Welcome. All right, and before we start, I don't know if you're noticing something. I just want to point out
I love it.
I want to point out thank you. I want to point out how remarkable it is that we have an all-female, high-level panel to open this conference. Gone are the days where we would hear excuses like, I just couldn't find any qualified woman to be part of the panel. No, 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 this is not something that we want to entertain. This is not something that we hear. And talking about SDG 5, gender equality, here it is. We have fulfilled that duty. All right, so we are talking about building trust in turbulent times, how to strengthen global alliances. Rebeca Grynspan, I want to start with you. Of course, when we think about turbulent times and you being an expert on trade, I believe that for most of the people here, the first thing that comes to mind when they hear trade is the trade tariffs or the trade wars that we're witnessing right now between the US and basically everybody else. Now, we'll get to that later, but first of all, I want to just start with the broader overview because you said something very interesting during the 60th anniversary of UNCTAD. You said that multilateralism is a choice and we need to defend multilateralism every day. But you're also calling for a new form of cooperation. So tell me what you want to see exactly.
Thank you very much. And it's really an honor to be in this panel, fantastic women and leaders. And I also want to pay tribute to my colleague, Achim Steiner, that will leave us in June. And believe me, after hearing him, you can understand how much we will miss him. So this is for Achim. So let me say three things with respect to multilateralism and the new realities. First, I think that we have to recognize the new realities. Yes, multipolarity, especially in the economic field, is here. But the problem is that this multipolarity is not being matched with the multipolarity in the multilateral system. So the governance of this multipolarity is still lagging behind. And that is the first point. If we want to build trust, we need to acknowledge that today we have a global economy that is multipolar. And I said, this is a fact, and multilateralism is a choice. If we will choose multilateralism, we have to acknowledge the new reality and adapt to that new reality. My second point is about the multilateral system to be able to be present, as I call it, before, during, and after. We cannot be only during the crisis. We have to be there before and we have to be there after. And we have to build the connections between this continuum. And if we don't, so we will go from crisis to crisis. We won't be able to prevent and to be able really to build the resilience that the new world requires. And we need to reform the multilateral system to be able to adapt, to meet this challenge. And my third point is how do we build trust within the system? Because trust is one of the main issues that mistrust is one of the main issues that we are dealing with. And I think that part of it is that we have to shape the narrative. We cannot allow the narrative to shape us. And I think that if we don't do something to really be able to communicate much better with the population, with the citizenship, if we won't be able to, again, capture the minds and hearts of the people, we won't be able to build a very strong multilateral system. That is what we need.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's take a look at how maybe one of these multilateral organizations and alliances is working. Let's take the example of the G20. South Africa is a member of the G20, and this year South Africa holds the presidency of the G20. It's, of course, a very exclusive club. Only 20 countries are involved there. But tell us how you are going to use the presidency to build trust, especially between the countries that have more political power and the ones that don't have that much political power.
Thank you very much. From our side, of course, if you look at the concept that we have adopted, is that we're talking about solidarity as well as inclusivity. So the trust can only be able to be built if we concentrate on inclusivity. For example, if you have an economic growth that does not include everyone, then it means that that inclusive growth or that particular growth is not going to be able to change and go to the places where we need it the most. In most cases, and it's just an irony that we are only women here, people that are actually at the barrel of society are the ones that are usually bypassed when economic development actually happen. So as a result, we really do believe that if we invest more in inclusivity, and how do we do inclusivity? We can only be able to do that if we change how we think as it relates to what we would usually call social issues. If you are going to be talking about education, look at it as an investment, because if you invest in education, then you are then now going to be able to ensure that you've got a labor force that is skilled enough. If you are going to include the issues of investment in health, don't only look at it as a social issue, but also look at it as making sure that the labor force that you are going to build and society as a whole will be a society that would then now reflect a healthy nation. So
and these are things that you are addressing during the G20 meetings and summits that you're having.
Definitely, that's what we are going to be dealing with. For example, on the development working group that we are actually leading from my department, we have something that is called, or a priority that is called, protection of social flaws. We are doing that precisely because we see it as an investment. So part of the negotiations that are actually taking place is to come up together with resolutions that our leaders will discuss and finalize that will deal with the issues that I've just spoken about, of protection of social flaws, that will include education and as well as health, but in particular the issues of ensuring that gender emancipation or women emancipation, as well as youth and people living with disability and transgender people, are actually going to be looked at. So those are some of the things that we are looking at in building protection, but most of all building the trust that you are talking about. So this G20, as it relates to the resolutions and the members' statement that will be coming out, will also be looking at that.
Thank you. I want to bring you now to the conversation, Minister Joyelle Clarke. First of all, when you're at conferences like these, how often do you have to explain where exactly your country lies? I have to admit, I had to really Google Maps it. I was not aware where exactly your island is located.
Very interesting question. I think this morning I had to say it about 4 times. I'm from St. Kitts and Nevis. It's in the Caribbean. And I understand that it's not Jamaica, it's not Trinidad and Tobago, but we are St. Kitts and Nevis. We're equally beautiful and equally resilient.
Wonderful. So how important is it for an island state like yours, a country that is not very large in terms of its geographic dimensions, in terms of its population, in terms of its say on the global political stage? How important is it for you to be members of international organizations and alliances?
And that's a very, very good question because St. Kitts and Nevis, we're only 50,000 people, a very small community. So in some countries, but for us, international spaces like COP, it's not simply a diplomatic ritual. For us, it's a lifeline. And we really don't have the luxury of geopolitical theater as we see deepening fractures globally. We are here for survival. And
Kindly put the mic a little.
oh, sorry. So
Yeah.
it's not lost on us that every time we show up to an international space to be provided the privilege to sit here with this group of phenomenal women to speak from the SIDS perspective gives us the opportunity to say, hey, we need a lifeline. We need partnership. We don't need pity. We need partnership. Importantly, if international spaces like COP, like HSC, are really to serve small island developing states, then there is a need to be more transparent in the COP processes in particular. There is a need for us to democratize access to influence for young people, for indigenous folk. There is a need for us to ensure that SIDS, our voices, are not only tokenistic at the decision-making table, but that we're really there to influence outcomes. For us, for St. Kitts and Nevis, we're recognizing that it's important to recenter multilateralism. If we're going to build trust in multilateralism again, if we're going to believe that these systems are working for SIDS, then we have to find ways to ensure that the partnerships that we're building, one, not only look towards global North and global South cooperation, but that we don't neglect the importance of South-South cooperation. That's also an opportunity for us, and for St. Kitts and Nevis, well, actually just 3 days ago, we hosted the Global Sustainable Island Summit, and we brought together 274 participants globally. We had regional partners, UN partners, and we had 232 participants from 45 island nations speaking about the importance of island cooperation. For us, the climate diplomacy is our survival. We can't do it without trusting.
We will talk about exactly the details about how
Correct.
climate change, of course, is affecting islands like yours in particular. But first, I want to move on now to Cindy McCain, because the topic, the title of this discussion is Building Trust in Turbulent Times. And for many people who are in a crisis, in areas of conflict, where there's hunger, the WFP, the World Food Program, is probably the only sign, really the tangible thing that they can see where they believe that the global community, the international community, is on their side. So how do you build trust, not only with the civilians, but also with the governments?
Well, I certainly appreciate the question. And trust has become the main forefront of how we operate. We've always operated that way, but how we're needing to operate in a different way now. As you know, your point about changing how we operate is very true and very real. But trust is critical to what WFP does, and our mission in ending hunger and addressing the root causes of hunger, more importantly, and as well as food insecurity and malnutrition, we couldn't do our work without trust. It has to be a part of what we do. But that's why our teams operate in 80 countries around the world, because we do have the trust, because we are a partner that is there, we're consistent, we most generally get in at scale, not always, as you know, in Gaza right now, we're not in at scale. But trust is a large part of that, and not just trust by the governments or the various entities, but trust for our beneficiaries on the ground. They have to know that we're not only in, but we will continue to come in. They can trust that. We at WP give food to whoever needs it. I mean, we take no political prize in any of this, and we certainly don't choose sides. And I think that's important in how and why people do trust us. We have very robust systems for tracking our goods and services and our cash-based transfers. By the way, cash-based transfers are not cash; they're vouchers. But that's the name of them. Anyway, our trust has been hard fought for, and I see right now this lack of ability to respect humanitarian law and humanitarian aid workers in general is abominable. They're shooting at us. They're shooting, they're blowing up our cars. They're doing all kinds of things. None of us have ever seen it quite this bad with regard to the treatment and the lack of respect for humanitarian aid workers. And I speak for all of us across the globe on that one. Thank you. I think lastly, the long-term impact would not be possible unless we did have this trust. There are times that we deal with countries that are perhaps not encouraging of WFP or organizations like ours to come in, but we get in and we are able to do it and do it consistently. And I might add too, we don't pop up. We just keep our head low. We do the job. We get it done, and we continue to do it. We're kind of your ground pounders, as my son, who's the Marine, tells me. Anyway, thank you very much for the question. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Now, Minister Alabali-Radovan had mentioned in her speech about the situation in Gaza. And I'm reading on the WFP website that there is enough food aid to feed the Gaza population for 2 months. The problem is access. Right. Corridors not being opened. And the minister has called for corridors to be opened and for food to get in there. There are reports of, in other countries, for example, food aid being stolen or diverted or funds being mismanaged. Isn't that also something that erodes people's trust in organizations like yours?
Well, in the case of Gaza, and this is specific because it is such a catastrophe, these people are not nefarious. They're starving to death. They see an aid truck coming. They want food for their families. I would do anything to feed my family, and I think you would too. So things are not being diverted in that particular sense. We take not just careful steps, we have devices and things that we do to be able to track and trace our stuff. Is it 100%? In the case of a war zone, probably not. But we do everything we can to make sure that the food is going exactly where it's supposed to go, because our donors expect that of us. And that's what we try to provide. But lastly, and I know Gaza is kind of the shiny object right now in the world, but we can no longer do this. Your point about access and not just for a dribble of food here and a dribble of food there is not going to solve this problem. And that's what's happening right now, which is driving the desperation and driving the panic that's going on in the country right now.
And we'll later talk about the massive amount of money you also need to sustain the program. We'll get to that in a bit, but first, I now want to turn to the minister. We've heard your speech, and we know that Germany wants to continue investing in development projects abroad. But what some people who maybe don't follow the day-to-day politics in this country know is that there's always this debate about why should Germany spend taxpayer money for projects, for example, in South Africa. Now, you've been the minister for less than a month. I'm sure that you've had this question asked a number of times. Do you have like a 30-second standard answer that you always give every time you're asked this question?
Well, I don't have standard answers yet. I hope that's okay with you. But of course, it is a challenge. It is a challenge in trust, not only in the multilateral system that we're seeing, that we just talked about, but also in development policy, also in Germany, in Europe. And as we're seeing that the United States are getting out of US aid and cutting budget. We see cutting budgets everywhere, not only in the US. It's a difficult situation, of course, when you have a difficult financial budget. But of course, it is now my job also to explain why it is also important to Germany that we cope with the crises that we're speaking about. And one point that I always make, because it is my personal history as a refugee coming to Germany, but a lot of people can see the point, is that if we don't do anything with those crises, people tend to flee. They see them, they have to flee. They don't want to, but they have to. And this is one of the examples that I can give people to show them why it's important. But also, of course, Germany's economy is based on export. That's why I made the example or the image of Hamburg, because I mean, as you can see it here, and it's not new, it's been like that for hundreds of years, especially in Hamburg. And so our economy is based on export, and of course at the same time on what's going on in the world. And as we saw with the corona pandemic, what it means when you have a crisis like that, people actually also in Germany feel what it means. Like, so we have to build trust also in Germany, but internationally at the same time. And this will be my job for the next 4 years.
So Germany also promotes multilateralism, and the thing is that for some countries, especially in the global south, for them being in these multilateral organizations does not feel like a win. You said that we're going to create win-win situations, but for some countries it feels like us being members of these alliances is just cementing the old power structures. So how do you build a relationship that is based on trust and that will bring fair collaboration between the partners?
We need to build trust in the multilateral system, of course, and that's why Germany is supporting the reforms are being made, for example, at the World Bank, but also the process of UN80. And I think one major key there is, and as I said in my speech, is that the countries of the global south will have to play a bigger role, and not only the donor countries, but at the same time the countries who are affected by the crises the most. So that will be the main key, I think, for the next years. And as I said, we want to have a North-South Commission as Germany to also establish sustainable partnerships with countries of the global south. I think the most important thing is that it's partnership, as you said. It's not about it's about partnership, and it's about finding out win-win situations for both sides. And I think the Hamburg Sustainability Conference today and tomorrow is a great time now, and a very crucial time to begin also this process.
Now, Minister Ramokgopa, I just want to bring you back into the conversation, because we're talking about encouraging all these alliances, but South Africa, for example, being a member not only of G20, but also of alliances like BRICS, do you sometimes have to justify to other partners why you're also being a member of other organizations, or while you are looking for allies elsewhere?
Not necessarily, because we do believe, and we always explain ourselves to say that shared benefit comes with shared responsibility. And if you look at most of these multilateral institutions and international corporations, we usually talk about the same thing in most cases. If it should be the issue of the COVID-19 that has happened, we would then now make sure that if it is at G20, we do talk about the same thing that we would say at the BRICS, but we would then now find similarities as it relates to the kind of investment that needs to actually come forth. Because if you talk about development cut across. It doesn't matter whether it's development in the BRICS or development at the G20. At the end of the day, development and sustainability would then now be able to bring positive sides to the economy, but also to society as well globally. So as a result, I really do believe where we are, we've never really had to explain ourselves, but but we always believe in the issue of shared responsibility and shared benefits wherever we are.
Okay, let's talk about those shared benefits, Rebeca Grynspan. With the ongoing trade wars that we're witnessing right now, I know that there's a report by UNCTAD about how the most vulnerable countries are the ones that are being mostly affected. Can you give us insights into that report?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you some numbers, yes? And how much these countries that are LDCs, seats, or landlocked countries can suffer from the trade war, yeah? If you take all the LDCs together,
The least,
developed countries, the least developed countries, 44 countries in the world, and you see how much they contribute to the deficit of the US, to the trade deficit of the US. All of them together contribute 1.6% to the deficit of the US. And so even if you take the objectives that the US have set in this policy, that is bring down the deficit, bring revenue, or protect national interests. These countries don't contribute to any of that objectives, but they will suffer the consequences the most. Only with the 10% a tariff, without going into the reciprocal tariffs that are much higher, only by the 10% tariffs, our estimates is that the trade, the exports of these countries will go down 20%. So they will be really hit very strongly. Let's say the seats, yes, all the small island developing states together, all of them together, St. Kitts and Nevis, part of it, they contribute only 0.4% to the deficit of the US. So it doesn't make sense to really hit these countries with the trade war.
So, how are the small-scale farmers and the small businesses that are being affected by these tariffs, how are they benefiting from their countries being members of UNCTAD? How are you fighting for them?
Oh, yeah. Okay. What do we do? You
Yes.
mean? Let me first say that we should not take this as the necessary policy, or what we are asking is to have a call to review the policy and spare these countries from the pain that they will go through if, the tariffs and the tariff war goes further. With respect to UNCTAD, we do a lot of things to help the capacities of these countries to really benefit from the trade and global trade. Look, developing countries can only grow with trade and investment. Trade is really a centerpiece of our capacity to be able to grow, especially for the small and medium-sized countries, because we don't have the scale to be able to be self-sufficient. So we need really trade to be able to thrive, and we need investment to be able to thrive. And so we help these countries in trade facilitation. We help the digitalization of customs, for example, and it's amazing what can happen when you do this. Yes, we just finished, for example, the digitalization of customs in Angola, 44% increase in the revenues from customs, or in Madagascar, or in Malawi, or in Zambia, or obviously we partner a lot with SADC and the South African regional trade. So we do a lot to really be able to build the capacity of the countries to attract investment and to be able to facilitate trade. Now, having said that, these countries
Please.
can,
I'm looking at the clock
but
right there.
having said that, these countries cannot do it without an international environment that will allow them to thrive. If the international financial architecture, if the investment, it doesn't go to these countries, if trade is being putting barriers to these countries, so they won't be able to make it, even if they do everything right at the national level. So the national and the international have to come together for the developing countries to be able to make it for their people.
Thank you very much. You've made a very strong case for cooperating in the trade area. Okay, I want to move now to Minister Clarke because this year, November, the COP30 is going to take place in Brazil. I'm sure your country will be represented there. What needs to happen for you and your country to say that COP30 has been a success? For us, how will you be able to raise your voice at the conference?
We're already branding COP30 as Caribbean COP, and Brazil has allowed us to do so. So we're really looking forward to serious commitments coming out of Belém. For us, trust in this system, trust is the currency of the climate economy. And SIDS will be asked to make net zero commitments, to make our declarations in our nationally determined contributions. But to build trust here, we also need reciprocal action. We need the global north and developed countries to also commit to scaling up our innovations. Innovations that we have already created because of our lived experience, but needs the financing to be advanced. Now, for us, some of the things that have to be said over and over again coming out of every COP. We need access to financing, but we need a flexible international financial architecture that responds to our needs, that understands that the debt that's provided, the financing that's provided to deal with our climate crisis has to respond to our lived vulnerabilities. We also need multilateral lending organizations to really have more creative and flexible ways of helping small island developing countries. The truth is, if we go to COP and we don't have financial commitments that match our experiences, or we don't move funding to the most vulnerable countries, then it would be unfortunate if COP30, the Caribbean COP, fails us. And I know we're gathered here this morning because we all share a commitment that to solve the climate crisis, to ensure that sustainability and survival for the least developed countries is a reality, we have to commit.
Now, you said, thank you. You said at an event last week that small island nations perhaps feel more intimately the climate crisis and the impacts of it, and you feel like there is a lack of urgency maybe with other countries because they don't feel the impacts immediately the way you do. Is that something that you're addressing, and how will we change so that people say, okay, even if I'm not affected directly, we need to take action now together?
Thank you so much for reminding me of that statement, because it was a sobering moment for us. And the truth is, whether you're a CEO here in Hamburg or you're a fisher folk in one of our small coastal villages in St. Kitts and Nevis, you feel it. But the challenge for us is we wake up every morning and we're seeing the reality of a changing climate. We turn on the news and we're seeing the reality of a changing global system that's not responsive to our needs. So it's easy to lose trust and faith in the international spaces that should serve our shared vulnerability. And perhaps the only way for us to build trust in all our negotiations and international spaces is for us to base this trust on our shared vulnerability. And what's our shared vulnerability? The climate crisis. So yes, we feel it more intimately because we live it every day, but there are opportunities for the global north to support the global south, and that gives us hope.
Thank you very much. So we've talked about opportunities for collaboration in the area of trade, in the area of climate protection. Let's talk about SDG number 2, zero hunger. Ms. McCain, you said as you entered into office that solving world hunger cannot be done by one organization alone, that global cooperation is critical. Now, we're also seeing that the US, which is the largest funder and the largest donor to the UN and its organizations, that has cut back aid massively. How is that affecting your work, and how are you finding new partners, maybe even in the private sector?
Well, when I took this job 2 years ago, I had had the opportunity to be the U.S. ambassador to the Rome-based agencies prior. So I saw WP from the other side, the side of the donor. And I did see it was a little fat, to be honest with you. So we took the initiative as soon as I got there to thin down, scale down, make ourselves more efficient, more effective, more science and technology with regards not just to about feeding, but also to how we implement it, how we drop, we use drones. There's all kinds of things going on right now to make us much more cost efficient. Knowing full well that we weren't going to have the kind of money that we had before. Little did we know it was going to go that far down, but anyway. So from that respect, we have handled that. We've scaled back our people. We've had to make all the cuts that everyone has had to make. But what it's left me with is each morning I wake up and I have to decide which group of hungry people do I take the food from to give to the starving people over here? That's the position it's put a lot of us in that do aid work the way we do. And so from the restructuring, the redesigning, all this has been very good for us. It's been it's been complex in doing it, but it's been the right thing to do for the agency as well. But there's a growing gap, and the gap is between government donors and the private sector. We need the private sector, not just because we need more money, but we need your expertise. We need your ability to tell us what we could do more efficiently, better, how we can do it. And so I rely on the private sector now a great deal and they've come to the table for sure, but we do need more of it. And because that's the right thing to do for the world also. We all have to be involved in this. You can't rely on us or the other three biggies within the UN to do the job completely. And let me also say, the people I work with at WFP are true heroes. They go in every day when it's complex, when people are firing at them, when there's guns or tanks, everything else going on, and they never give up. And that's an incredible sense of honor that I have to be a part of this organization.
Thank you very much. Thank you. As we wrap up our conversation, Minister Maropene Ramokgopa, I want to turn to you again, because there's a debate that I'm seeing on the African continent. With all these changes, these global changes, Africans are asking, okay, why are we relying so much on these global alliances, on the international organizations? What is the responsibility of our own governments to make sure that we meet the Sustainable Development Goals? What does the South African government do to bring food and water and education to the people of South Africa?
Okay. One of the things, especially in Africa in particular, and it's also going to be one of the things that we are going to see as a deliverable as it relates to the G20, is the issue of strengthening domestic resources mobilization. But we are not only going to look at partnerships as it relates to private sector and allowing private sector participation in building the state and capacitating the state. But we're also going to invest and try to ensure that one of the priorities that become a deliverable is the issue of curbing the illicit financial flows. It has happened a lot in Africa.
What do you mean by that exactly?
We are meaning that we have realized that the illicit financial outflows out of Africa in particular goes actually into the developed nations. So we really need to ensure that we deal with that particular matter so that we can be able to have our own tax base, but ensure that we mobilize domestic resources to be able to fund and finance our own programs. So that if we have to deal with the issues of what we are dealing with currently globally, where USA is actually withdrawing some of the support they are giving, we have our own domestic resources. But if we are not going to deal with our own issues as it relates to companies that operate in our own continent, the illicit financial flows is actually some of the things that, or one of the impediment that is actually not making us to be able to deal with our own resources that we need to be able to fund what we are promising our people. So what we need to do is to strengthen our tax base, strengthen capacity of the state, open up for private sector participation so that we can then now be able to fund what our people need.
Thank you very much. And I'm gonna give the final word to Minister Alabali-Radovan. So you have said that Germany will continue investing in projects that facilitate the alleviation of poverty, projects that deal with education, and many more projects to meet the SDGs. What role is Germany going to play on the global stage going forward? How do you make sure that you remain a relevant voice while at the same time also giving a voice to the countries that don't have that political power on the global stage?
Well, we will stay a strong role and this is the signal that also we want to send out today, that Germany is a strong, reliable partner for the international organizations, but also for the countries of the global south. And we want to build sustainable relationships. And I'm so glad that you're all here today. We have the possibility now, today and tomorrow, to build those relationships and to continue with them. And we will continue to play also a leading role in fighting the climate crisis, but also in achieving the sustainability goals. And I'm very looking forward to work with all of you on that, on the base of mutuality and partnership.
Thank you very much. So we're going to take that as the final word. Please, a huge round of applause to my fantastic panelists. Thank you. And thank you very much for you, our wonderful audience. Thank you for being so attentive. Thank you to everybody who was watching on the live stream.